Hey, Sean here from the Commander's Brew. This is a deck tech for Myrkul, Lord of Bones. Myrkul, Mr. Cool. This guy's Mr. Cool. You're not fooling anybody, Myrkul. Calling yourself Mr. Cool? We'll see if that sticks. It's gonna stick. It's the greatest name of any Magic card. Mr. Cool, Lord of Bones. Anyway, the names don't stop. This is an AristoBrats deck. Oh, and also Darksteel Eric's here. Hello, Darksteel Eric here, just reminding you that Sean signed this contract without reading it, so we have controlling interests of the show as Darksteel Industries, but we're not going to put a big fingerprint on things. We're just going to pop in here to say hello, and we're going to do a couple of ads later on. Okay, back to the show. Okay, so firstly, what is an Aristobrat? It's kind of my take on Aristocrats, but I'm adding Hatebears. So it can't just be called Aristocrats. Could have been like Aristo-Bears or Hateocrats, but AristoBrats is kind of cool. Group Hug, Group Slug, Aristocrats, AristoBrats. And then I'll get to what green does in a minute. But here's Myrkul, or Mr. Cool. So Myrkul costs a lot, but as you can see, we kind of get to double dip on all of our creatures. Naturally, if we have some sort of sack outlets or ways for creatures to die, this just pays us off. There is an interesting tension here though, because it's a 7-mana commander. So in theory, we might want some recursion before we get to Myrkul. But once Myrkul's out, nothing will ever be in the graveyard again. So then the recursion becomes dead cards. It's an interesting dilemma. How did I deal with it? In any case, most of the Aristocrats come from the black part of the deck, so here's the Aristocrats. Zulaport Cutthroat, Cruel Celebrant, and Bastion of Remembrance are very special in that they affect each opponent. Each opponent loses a life, we gain a life, and the drawback, if you want to call it that, is that it has to be a creature that we control dies. However, none of them care about tokens or not. Then there's something like Blood Artist, which is like one of the most classic Aristocrats that everyone thinks of, but this only hits one player at a time. However, it does deal with every creature on the battlefield. Sometimes that's way more for us. Poison Tip Archer kind of gives us the best of both worlds. It works for every creature on the battlefield, and each opponent loses that one life. We don't gain any life, but that seems like a very reasonable trade for this effect. Oh, we got a new Aristocrat in Baba Lysaga Night Witch. This is a pretty cool card. Now, you get to sacrifice up to 3 permanents, and you have to cover 3 card types. But that means you can get 2 card types out of 1 card if it's like an enchantment creature or an artifact creature. So we'll probably want to sacrifice 3 creatures anyway to get the maximum use out of our Aristocrats. But each opponent losing 3 life and we gain 3 life, not to mention drawing 3 cards. This is an excellent card, if you can make it work. So that's the Aristo part of the deck. Now let's talk about the Brats, the Hatebears. Hatebears are Brats. Feels like a very bratty thing to do to not let other people play. Spirit of the Labyrinth is a great Hatebear. However, capping the card draw for everybody hurts. I think we'll want to draw more cards, so I don't think we run this. I'm aware that a lot of decks could be drawing more than us, and this might do pretty good, but it just shuts down too much. Leonin Arbiter, however, seems pretty decent. Making people play 2 to search the libraries, that's a tax. And we get to choose how we ramp. Maybe we'll do creatures. Speaking of ramp, Kataki War's Wage is a very interesting bear. Not technically a bear because it's a 2-mana 2/1 instead of a 2/2, but making people pay for artifacts is quite a tax. Especially nowadays when there's just more and more treasure generation, this kind of wipes the board of their treasures and most of their mana rocks. This one's pretty mean, but not as mean as Draneth Magistrate. I mean, we all know this card. It doesn't let people cast commanders from the command zone or the graveyard or whatever. It's the meanest. And we got a new Hatebear too, Archivist of Ogma. It's a $15 card, not surprising because we can draw a card anytime an opponent searches their library. Our opponents tend to do that, and that flash clause too means we get to snag the first one almost assuredly. Just flash this in while there's a search on the stack, and there you go, you got your card back. And 1 life. Deep Gnome Terramancer, a true Hatebear. Well, I mean, I guess it's not a Hatebear technically, it depends how you define it, but when our opponents have a land come into play without playing it, we get an extra plains once per turn. Now, it seems like that's only going to be for cultivate type of things, but that does also cover fetch lands. The first land is played, but the second one just kind of appears. And one that I think is worth considering is Strict. It does fly, it's 2 mana, I love that, but it does affect ETB abilities, which definitely shuts down a lot of decks. but I think it's going to shut down our draw engine too. I'll get to that in a second. So for that reason, I don't know if I want to run strict Proctor, but if we did want to eliminate ETB abilities, there's a nice package we can run with things like Hunted Horror or Eater of Days that just have brutal enter the battlefield abilities, but we don't have to actually have them. We can just have the big beefy creatures and not pay for them. And no matter how you go, Teysa Karlov belongs in the deck. That's just double Aristocrat triggers. Still only $2. I kind of thought this card would be a lot more. It's just so good. So I haven't talked about green cards yet. Ooh, just gotta step in real quick and remind you to like and subscribe. That really helps us out. And here's 2 ads, one fake, one real. Have you ever ordered a pizza? Do you remember how hard it is to pick all of your toppings? There's just so many choices to think about. Do you want pepperoni? Do you want mushrooms with bacon? Do you want onions, peppers, sausage? Do you want barbecue chicken? It's impossible to choose. Well, worry no more. With the Dark Steel Pizza app, just allow the app to get access to all of your personal data, and we'll connect to local pizza shops to help you pick your best toppings. I'll try it now. Pineapple and broccoli. Thanks, Dark Steel Pizza app. The more data you give up, the better it works. And now the real ad from the Wizards Tower, wizardtower.com. To our Canadian viewers, it's the best place to buy Magic singles. If you use our coupon code BREWBALDERS, you'll get 5% off singles orders $20 or more. And don't forget to check out wizardtower.com for more content. Articles, deck tech, strategy stuff. It's more than just a place to buy cards. Okay, back to the show. And I think, oddly enough, green is going to bring the card draw. I mean, it's not that odd. Green is incredible at drawing cards. We could run stuff like Beast Whisperer, Guardian Project. If you have the money, the Great Henge is a fine one too. These are all cards that let us draw cards as creatures enter the battlefield. Or on cast, I'm not being picky. And this is important because we want to flood the board with creatures. Myrkul makes a token version of the creature as long as it started as a non-token creature. And we want to be able to sacrifice things, so we need the fodder for it. That means we need a handful of creatures. I've tried to keep the casting cost pretty low. You'll notice most of the cards I talked about were about 2 mana. That's so that we can get extra things out there. And then with cards like Vizier of the Menagerie, it just allows us to play things off the top of our deck and just flood the board even quicker. Augur of Autumn does the same thing as long as we have 3 or more creatures with different powers, so that's a good feature. But either way, we can get rid of that land off the top of the library by playing it in case we need to unlock something else for the Vizier. And I think Vivian's Monsters Advocate, I included this card because of the static ability to play creatures off the top of the library, but both of these other abilities are incredible. Making an extra beast, that's always useful, something to sacrifice, something to defend things, but also that -2, if we're short an Aristocrat or a specific hate bear or whatever, we'll just cast a 3-drop and get the exact right one for the job. This card's great. And I have to take a look to see if Nalia Diarnis belongs in the deck. We only get to cast Clerics, Rogues, Warriors, and Wizards off the top of the library, but depending how we do the deck, we might have enough to make that work. And in case you haven't seen it, we already did a Nalia deck tech. It was all about maximizing the party, like maximizing it. You can check that out here, or keep going on this one. So here we are. We have been casting a lot of creatures. And again, most of them I've tried to keep pretty low cost so we can flood the board. I haven't got into the little 2-mana utility creatures, little mana dorks, things like that. That's going to be most of our sack fodder, but stuff's going to end up in the graveyard before Mr. Cool shows up. And I think that's okay because we're going to run cards like Immortal Servitude. Ascend from Avernus is basically the same thing. We're going to spend 3 mana and X and return a ton of creatures from the graveyard to the battlefield right away. That means all our hate bear effects are back. We are ready to get a whole bunch more of Aristocrat triggers going. We can even leverage a card like From Dusk Till Dawn because the Dusk side does deal with problematic creatures that might want to kill us. And that Aftermath is a great way to get a bunch of cards back in our hand. Again, I built the deck lean on purpose so that we could dump them out pretty quick. Even a card like Finale of Eternity, if we have a few mana dorks and the game goes a little bit long, we may be able to cast this X = 10 and get all of those creatures back from the graveyard. And if we've got one of these mass reanimate spells in our hand, we might want to consider just wrathing the board aggressively. Day of Judgment, Kaya's Wrath. Here's a couple of classics. They only cost 4 mana. That's great. Sometimes 4 mana is too much. You know, sometimes you want to pay less than 4 mana. Sometimes you have to pay less than 4 mana because of a little dude called Gaddock Teague. Truly, maybe the most hateful hate bear the game knows. This card is miserable to play against. Run it with a grain of salt, a pinch of salt. Run it with a, is that the saying? Run it with a grain of salt? It's a salty card. It is the grain of salt. Anyway, nobody can cast non-creature spells with mana cost 4 or greater. That means most of the wraths. And you can't get around that by running something with an X on the mana cost. So like a lot of our sorceries get shut down by this, but so do your opponents. But not all the wraths. Path of Peril is a 3 mana value card, but you can cleave it to become a full wrath. This gets around Gaddock Teague. Damn. I love this card. The name. I love the name. Same deal. It's a 2 mana value card as far as Gaddock Teague is concerned, but we can overload it and then destroy each creature. So we sneak in one of these wraths. Gaddock Teague is gone, obviously, and then we just mass reanimate everybody and Gaddock Teague's back, and we've gotten a billion aristocrat triggers. Might be enough to kill a couple people or the whole table. I don't know. So the AristoBrats, the bratty nature of the deck. I feel like I've talked about this card a lot. Maybe it's time I do some self-reflecting and see where this is coming from, because I want to run Armageddon in this deck. So here's what we do. Eventually, we'll get to the point where we're not going to look at the graveyard anymore. We've got Myrkul out, and in our hand is an Armageddon and a Wrath spell. So as long as the coast is clear, nobody's going to counter it. We can float all of our mana, destroy all the lands, and then cast a big Wrath spell. Myrkul will ensure that they'll all come back, so we'll still have all of our aristocrat effects, we'll still have all of our hate bears effects. The AristoBrats are in full swing, and we'll have things like Augur of Autumn to play lands off the top of the deck, one of those other cards to let us play creatures off the top of the deck. Maybe we've sandbagged a land or two because we know what's about to happen. It might be okay. It might be fine. People say don't run an Armageddon unless you can win, and this maybe means we can win. Maybe, right? I don't know. Whew. So that's the plan for Myrkul, AristoBrats. Let me know what you think of the deck, or at least the name. The name's my favorite part, maybe. In any case, you keep being you. The world's a better place for it. See you next time.